we are going to talk all about our Enneagram type fives. The awareness to action framework refers to them as striving to feel detached, which sometimes people feel like, oh, that's negative. It's really just they have an ability to manage their time, resources, not get emotionally entangled in other people's lives or drama. They don't need a lot from anybody else, and they kind of don't want anybody else to need a lot from them. Other methodologies might call them the investigator. You might know them as the observer, the leadership style, and we'll talk just a little bit more about that. According to the awareness to action framework, they refer to the type 5 as the strategist. And this energy is important for every team in certain moments, situations with certain people, regardless if you have a 5 on your team or not. This energy is important in the workplace on a team because they bring clarity, they bring objectivity, they bring so much expertise and professional insight, research. They bring the data, and they're able to really problem solve, and a lot of times very creative problem solving, and are able to contribute towards innovation with an organization because they have all of this data and information and this ability to kind of observe and understand how all the pieces work together. So whether you have a type 5 on your team or not, this energy, tapping into this as an individual, as a team, still is probably going to be needed. They tend to focus most on managing their energy, conserving their energy might be a better word, conserving, managing their resources. They know, hey, it's 5 o'clock. What I hear from a lot of fives is that they'll say, I want to be invited to happy hour, but I know that I'm probably not going to be able, I'm not going to be able to do it. I need to go home. I need to recharge. I need my alone time. They also have and I think anybody can do this, but they have, it just comes a little bit more natural to them to kind of compartmentalize. So if they had a bad day, a bad morning at home, they tend to kind of, all right, that happened at home. Now I'm at work. Okay, something bad happened at work, but now I'm at home, and I'm just they kind of have this ability to compartmentalize, silo things. And so they're just whatever's in front of them is what they're focused on. And we'll talk in just a little bit. That can be such a strength, but when you overdo it, it can feel to the other person like you're detaching, you don't care, you're kind of robotic. And so we gotta be careful with that as a type 5. They're also focused on mastery. They want to be the expert, they go-to person in whatever subject they need to be with, whether it's the industry, a particular area, a particular niche within the organization, and they want to collect the knowledge, the information, the data to help them get there. What does striving to feel detached at work look like? This person is going to focus on conserving their time. They're very aware of their space, their emotional energy, the mental energy that they're going to need to process, to think. They're just very in touch, tend to be very in touch with those types of things. And they want to avoid feeling overwhelmed, intruded on, unprepared, or I guess exposed as unprepared, um, which sounds a little bit like a type 6. Um, if this is something you're struggling on, we can talk about that later. What I see the most is 5 and 9s. Sometimes people struggle with, am I a 5 or am I a 9? Sometimes, occasionally 5 or 6. Sometimes, occasionally, am I a 1 or am I a 5? I will link our YouTube channel in the show notes here for this episode, or if you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can go back out and see. We have several videos where we match up different types. Am I this or am I that? We do have a 1 and a 5 versus 5. And I believe we have a 3 versus a 5. And I believe a 5 versus a 9. So that will give you, if you're struggling between those, that will give you some additional insight into that. Fives will often say that they feel safest, most in control, that they're living their best lives when they are informed, prepared, have had time to process, think pros and cons lists, look at the numbers, think things through. That is really important. They tend to not be impulsive, follow my gut, follow my emotions type of decision makers. And they really do have a deep desire to understand and master the knowledge, the task, whatever it is that they're being asked to do before jumping into action. So you typically can bank on, if you are asking, if you know a teammate is a type 5 and you're asking them for information or they're sharing what they learn, it has been heavily thought out, heavily researched, probably heavily vetted, and it is probably accurate. You're getting all the details, the full picture, coming from a type 5. They tend to not be the kind of big picture people. These people like the details, like the data. Strengths in the workplace might look like their ability to be very analytical, very perceptive. They're also very curious, which is such a when they're really dialed in, kind of living their best life, they can be open-minded and what might happen, kind of a just a constant experiment. Let's see what might happen here. Let's look at this. What if we introduce this information? What if we introduce this? So that's something that you can expect from your type 5 teammate. They tend to be calm under pressure. And I think this is one of those why sometimes they can be confused. Am I a 5 or a 9? Am I a 9 or am I a 5 or am I a 1? Because those other types too have a tendency to show up in chaos and stressful situations with a calm and steady presence. They are not going to get too excited when things are with good news, and they're not going to get too stressed out, too overwhelmed when there's bad news. Emotion tends to not cloud their thinking. So when everybody else might be really excited or really upset, they're going to say, "Hey, let's look at the numbers and see what's really going on." Like, you feel this way, but what does the data actually say? And that can be such a calming and helpful presence when emotions are running high. They tend to be very independent. They, like I said at the very beginning, I think another way to describe a type 5 is very self-sufficient. And they expect that same self-sufficiency from the people that they work around. But they can be really independent problem solvers, very innovative thinkers. They can be innovative, creative, because they're collecting all this information. They're putting all this data together in their mind, in their brains. They're observing. So they are seeing possibilities and solutions that maybe the rest of us are missing because we don't have all of this extra information and have taken the time to think it through, process it fully, observe what else is going on. And then I will also say they tend to be excellent at recognizing patterns and seeing things that others miss. So that kind of goes back to that being kind of creative, out of the box problem solvers, which I think a lot of times we think of, oh, type 4 has the monopoly on creativity, but 5s can also be very creative. It just kind of, it comes from a different place. Now, when this energy is overused, that self-sufficiency, that independent appreciation of autonomy, I'm going to go and do my own thing, can come across as emotionally detached. And sometimes that might create distance, or it might seem on the receiving end of this that they're avoiding you. The type five is avoiding you. I don't think that type fives would say, "Oh, I'm intentionally trying to avoid you." I mean, maybe they are because they don't want to get entangled in whatever drama or issues that you're having. But this is one that we talk a lot about when it comes to a five stepping into a leadership role, taking on that manager role where they're going to have to manage all kinds of different personalities. And some people might need a little bit more attention, might need a little bit more rapport building. And so that will be an opportunity of for growth for our type fives in that. Um, let's see, what else do I have here? Paralysis analysis. This is one that other types will struggle with too. Fives can over research, overthink, make a list, make another pros and cons list, do it again, get more information, need more sources. And that is great to be thorough. And some situations might require more thoroughness than others. But the thing to watch out for our type fives is overdoing that and never stepping into action or delaying the action that is needed. So, a question that we'll talk about with our fives is before you even finish the process, one of your starting questions needs to be something about how will I know when I have enough information? When you're making decisions, when you're completing your work, because you could get lost in just that research and you love it, you enjoy it, so it feels safe. Action might seem a little more scary, so you have a tendency to avoid that. So that will be an opportunity for growth for our type fives as well. And then we've talked before about the different stances, which I like. This is not something that the awareness to action model teaches. This is more the I think almost every other Enneagram framework has something about the stances. And I do like it in certain situations. And we did an episode a couple with my co-host D, and we talked about the fours, the fives, the nines, those that are in what is known as the withdrawn stance. And it is type fives do have a tendency to withdraw when they're feeling overwhelmed. Sometimes just to kind of cope, maybe that's just kind of their safe place. So they're going to go within and they might withdraw or withhold their information. They might withdraw their time and withdraw their feelings. And that's where that sometimes people are like, "Ugh, are they a human or are they a robot?" Because they might just say, it doesn't matter how I feel about this, it matters what the numbers say. But sometimes feelings can be facts. Feelings can be an important part of a decision, of the story, of a sales pitch potentially, or to be influential. It tends to work out when you can infuse it with some sort of human emotional experience. And fives, again, that will be an opportunity for growth. They have a tendency to think, show me the data, don't give me the drama, which again could be a strength, but when it's overdone, it can feel hard to have some sort of relationship with someone like that. Now, their working style, how this might show up specifically in the workplace, they are going to do, if you work with one, if you are leading a type five, they are going to have a tendency to really thrive and appreciate autonomy and private focus time. I hear from a lot of fives, well, and we'll talk about this in just a second, but they hate to be busted in on. This is the type that does not have an open door policy most of the time. Getting sprinkled with Slack questions throughout the whole day is going to be hard for them. They want that private focus time. Like, I can be on a team, we can do teamwork, but I don't need to sit next to you and talk next to you and do this project or work on this task. It's like, tell me what you need from me and I'm going to go off and do it myself. They really value competency, obviously, in themselves, but they really value it, excuse me, and appreciate it in other people. That, let's see, competency, accuracy, intellectual depth. I think we've talked before about the type fours appreciating emotional depth. Our type fives really appreciate that intellectual depth. And then the our type fives have a preference to be more behind the scenes. They don't need to be in the spotlight necessarily. There are a couple other types like this for different reasons. They prefer kind of that being the influence behind the throne. Type fives, here, use my information. They have a tendency, I would say, and we'll talk about this in just a minute when we get to the different instinctual biases. But I think they appreciate being acknowledged for their contribution, but they don't necessarily need to be the one sharing it in the spotlight. They might sometimes, but they're not going to be overly charismatic or talking with their hands when they're presenting. It's going to be very matter of a fact tendencies. And sometimes that's the energy that you need, depending on the audience, the situation, to build trust and credibility. I would also say that people might experience them as aloof in a meeting, as disengaged, that they're checked out. But most fives will say, no, I am very engaged. It's all happening up here in my head. I'm taking it in. I'm observing what's going on. I don't have a lot to say yet. I'm observing, I'm taking in the information, I'm collecting the information, and then I'm going to process. The other thing that we'll talk about during our workshops to be a supportive teammate for a type five is to give them as much time as you can to process information. They tend to just need some time, whether that is 5 minutes, an hour, a day. And so you'll find them not acting impulsively, not making crazy, wild, risky decisions. They have really taken the time to do their research and think it through. Now, I mentioned at the very beginning of this episode, the leadership style for our type five is known as the strategist. This does come from the awareness to action terminology, and they have a tendency to lead with logic, thoughtful planning, and precision. Want to rely on the details, the facts. We talked about how type 5 teammate, will bring calm and steadiness. Same with our type 5 leader. They're going to bring that calm rationale during chaos or a conflict. They have a tendency to be able to set clear expectations that are rooted in reality, in expertise, in facts. And their challenge as a leader will be, no surprise, that kind of laissez-faire, hands-off leadership approach that, listen, I don't need a lot from you. I don't want you to need a lot from me. And it can come across or cause disconnection on a team where relationships are so important. So that will be both a teammate growth opportunity and a leadership opportunity. In the workplace, pet peeves and preferences that I hear most often from our type fives, and I've kind of jumped around a little bit, so we'll go through these quickly because I've mentioned some of them already. But interrupting them, both in real life, busting in on them while they're working, interrupting them with Slack or pinging them with multiple text messages or multiple emails. What I hear from fives is they'll say, if you have questions, that's fine. Could you just like compile them all in a list and send them to me at the end of the day or the next morning, or, wait halfway through the day and send them to me. And they're not trying to be difficult. It's just they are focused on what they're doing. And it is very hard to jump back and forth, or I don't know that hard is the right word. They don't like that. They don't like that. I don't know that there's a lot of people that do. There's some people that, I'm thinking of our type twos, maybe our type sevens, who might enjoy a little back and forth, a little chit chat, might enjoy the more like quick questions so you're connecting throughout the day. um Fives just aren't going to love that. They're not going to love that. They also don't love having demands on their time, and that goes back to that whole core striving to feel detached. I don't want you to need me. I don't want to, after I've left for the day, I don't want to have to respond to emails, at 7 o'clock at night. I don't know that anybody loves that, but it's going to be extra irritating to our type fives. They don't necessarily want to be on the group text message, getting funny memes. I think that they appreciate being included, but again, it just feels like this is pulling away my focus. This isn't necessary. Where on the flip side, you could say, well, it is, yeah, maybe it's not directly tied to your work task list, but it's important for rapport building with the team. So you'll just have to kind of navigate that in your own situation, but just know that there may be some opportunities to kind of step out of what is most comfortable, and some of your initial preferences. Let's see, what else do I have? Feeling emotional pressure or forced to participate can be another pet peeve. Again, forced to participate before they have fully had a chance to think things through. And then they don't necessarily want to hear about your bad day. They don't necessarily want to have to talk about their own feelings. So, I know sometimes with team events, there'll be some interesting icebreakers or team building activities. Sometimes that might be hard for a five, depending on what it is. And it can feel a little bit like pressure, when it's just like, can we just focus on what we're here to focus on? And then several other types, seven, eights come to mind that also do not like to be micromanaged, very much need their autonomy. So to have that taken away can feel stressful. It can feel frustrating. It can feel annoying. So what do they prefer in the workplace? Almost the opposite. So opportunities for independent work, uninterrupted focus time, an ability to contribute knowledge in a meaningful way. So they like to go out and research, to pull information, to think about things, to analyze, and then they want it to be used. It is almost heartbreaking for a five to go do all of that and then turn it in, share it, and then the team say, "Oh, we've actually changed directions, or we don't need that, or that was more than we were needing." They want whatever they're pulling to feel like, "Oh, this is contributing in a meaningful way." They would love to have access to opportunities to learn and grow with their expertise, be able to research, have additional tools, to be able to help them do those things. And then what I will also hear is that they appreciate clear boundaries. So just let me know, when I'm expected to answer emails, when am I expected to answer calls. What are those expectations? I may not love them, but let me know what they are so that I don't, again, feel like, so then I can manage my time. I can manage my energy levels with that clear expectation. All right. So how do we give feedback to a type five? Some things to think about. And again, not all fives are the same. These may not all resonate with the five in your life. None of them may. Maybe there's only one or two. So with all of these, this is a starting place for getting curious, but some things to maybe run by your type five. Say, "Hey, I heard this. Is this true for you?" I don't want to say obviously, but no surprise that when you're giving a type five feedback, you want to make sure that you have those clear facts and specific examples. You do not want to go in saying, "I feel like," they're going to have a hard time receiving that feedback if it feels like you're emotional about it, you're not pulling from actual facts. When you're giving them feedback, you also want to do your best to give them time to process before expecting a response. So you may have a sit down with your type 5 and they may not say a lot. And you need to be okay with that. And you need to actually encourage them. I don't need anything right now. Let's revisit at the end of the week once you've had time to process and we can pick back up. You can add to this. You can share your thoughts. You can push back because in the moment, the type 5 probably isn't going to have a lot of feedback to give to that feedback or response. They're going to need some time to take it in, think about it, process it, and before they have the response that they feel comfortable with. You want to emphasize, highlight how feedback is actually helpful in increasing effectiveness or reaching that mastery level. We all need feedback. So if you can tie it back to something they care about, even better. And then you want to avoid, and I think this is true for anybody, but avoid judgmental or intrusive language, like, again, oh, thinking you know how they feel. Just be careful with that. Now, as a type 5, what might you need to keep in mind as you're receiving some feedback? Accept that mistakes are a part of learning and leadership. So somebody might have some quote unquote negative feedback for you. We all have some negative feedback. It is hard to take, but just remembering that even if you spent all of this time researching and even if you took your time thinking something through, mistakes are going to happen. They're going to happen. So, just don't learn from them. Don't beat yourself up. Don't stay stuck on them too long. Share what support or information feels helpful to you or that you feel like is missing. Don't assume that other people know. So if somebody has given you feedback, ask those questions. Maybe, ask for additional facts, information, data, and then make sure that you let your manager, your teammate know I, this is how I like to be supportive. This is the best way for me to, this is how I can perform the best. This is how I can show up the best for the team and let the people know, because it might be very different for you than maybe what works for them. Okay. And then we have like all of these, we have overlaid the instinctual biases so that we actually get 3 different flavors for our type 5. The first flavor is when we overlap the preserving instinctual bias with the type 5 striving to feel detached. This is a very private, probably the most private, probably the most resource conserving, and probably the most practical. 5 out of all the 3 flavors, they will have a tendency to focus on security, minimalism, and comfort, which makes sense. The preservers are focused on risk management, conserving resources. So it's just kind of, you really double down here with that type 5 energy. This might be the textbook type 5, the stereotypical type 5 that so many of us have read about or see. Now, when you overlay the navigating 5, which is focused on group dynamics, understanding roles and responsibilities, information exchange, which sometimes might be office gossip, you get kind of an interesting, I don't want to say opposites, but there's some different energy that is overlapping here. And so it makes sense that this type of 5, even though they're driven, that core logic, that core motive is striving to feel detached, how it gets expressed is going to have more to do with that navigating energy. So they're going to want to be a intellectual connector. They're going to care about the group intelligence, the group's capabilities, the group's competence. They're really going to want that for the group. They might deep dive into niches of they might share knowledge or I guess put a more of a focus on sharing their knowledge and doing it maybe more strategically for the group's benefit so that the group can make progress. So that information that they're collecting, that creative problem solving isn't just for them, it is for the group's benefit. And then lastly, our transmitting energy, which is I want to leave a legacy. They're a little less risk adverse. They have a higher risk tolerance. They want to do deep and meaningful work. They're okay being in the spotlight and being seen. So again, there's some opposite energy here with this one. So this is probably going to be your most assertive and probably your most intense type 5 flavor. Um, how they want to be seen isn't necessarily, oh, I just want to be in the spotlight for the sake of being in the spotlight. It's, I want to be seen and valued as highly capable. I want to be seen as a thought leader in my industry. I want to be seen as as having this mastery and something and to be recognized for that. And then I got ahead of myself. This person might do the deep dives into the niche expertise and enjoy sharing it. Whereas the others might be a little bit more hesitant to communicate on it, to talk about it. It's more like, hey, I put it in the report, refer to page 5. This person may have more of a tendency to want to present that information. They're not just out, charming, spinning things. The things that they are talking about and communicating does come from all the research and data that they have collected. So 3 different flavors that can show up very different ways. That is always helpful, like we've talked about with these. If you are struggling between a couple of different types, just understanding, oh, what flavor of a 5 I might be can help you kind of narrow it down as well. Now, when we look at growth paths for our type 5s, there's an arrow to the type 8, and this tends to be the type that they neglect the most. Striving to feel powerful, the type 8, very direct, a lot of energy, a lot of action, a lot of gut reactions, a lot of gut decision making, decisive, bold, is okay being in the spotlight or being in that leadership position, taking charge. And so that can feel way out of the type 5's comfort zone. But there's so much to be pulled in, not to act like an 8, but to pull in the strengths of an 8 to enhance the strengths of your type 5. So this might look like taking action before everything is researched perfectly, kind of learning on the go, figuring out as you go, claiming your authority and your power, being powerful in visible ways. The other type is the type 7, that there's a lot of growth opportunities in here. Type 7s are starting to feel excited. They are a little bit more impulsive. So you might, as a 5, look for ways to bring in more spontaneity into your personal life, maybe your team. Where can you find the positive? Look for the optimism. Look for the possibilities in your decision making while still hanging on to reality and the facts, but also spending some time on, this is what the facts say, the information, but sometimes things can be even better, bigger. There's more possibility out there than we could even imagine. So pulling that into some of that 5 energy that you have, and then allowing play and fun and celebration to enhance your working style. Allow play to fuel your creativity rather than draining your focus. So finding ways to do that. And then as we wrap up, a couple of quick experiments. If you happen to most resonate with the type 5, some things that you can experiment with to grow in your role as a person, as a leader, is to share one idea publicly before it feels fully ready. Because I'm going to assume that your level, your threshold for what is ready is beyond what most people have. So when you think, you're 60-70% ready, you're probably where most people would feel like, okay, yeah, I can share this. So just practice, and that'll be kind of for you to play with. What is that threshold? Um, the other one here is to communicate your needs and boundaries directly. And again, our type 5s tend to withdraw when they feel overwhelmed or stressed. It might not feel like, oh, well, this is a feeling. Let me, I'm feeling this way. I'm going to process it in my head. I think I feel, and I do that too. But sharing, hey, I'm having a hard day right now. I need some extra space, or maybe, hey, I'm having a hard day. Um could we grab coffee later this morning? I just kind of need somebody to vent to. And that might not be your go-to strategy, but there might be a lot of rapport building, relationship building that could be had there. You feel taken care of, you feel supported by asking for what you need, and people know what you need because you're asking for it. And then the last one is to schedule to schedule your connection time with your teammates. And so, whatever you want to, connection check-ins. And I think this is going to be very important, especially for our type 5 leaders. So you don't have to schedule an hour with everybody once a week, right? Maybe I'm going to schedule 15 minutes with two members of my team once every week, or one person for 10 minutes once a week, or just 5 minutes. I'm going to find 5 minutes to check in at some point in the week, relationally, talk about their day, talk about something, kind of personal, or some interest that they have. With the 7 members on my team, I'm going to try and find a minute or two here throughout the week, whatever that looks like for you, but scheduling it and being really intentional. And then if you happen to work with the 5, some ways to support them is around sending agendas or any questions that are going to be expected to be answered in that meeting. Send them ahead of time. They don't love the surprises. They like to have time to think it through. So don't surprise them, putting them on the spot. As much as you can, respect those boundaries, respect those focus periods. So hold those questions. Maybe don't talk about your, vacation for 20 minutes to this person. Find another teammate to share that with, or your bad day. If it's during their focus time. And then lastly, ask for their expertise, but then also what I hear is that they do want to be credited appropriately. So if you got something from your type 5 teammate, I think we all like that. I don't think that's just a type 5 thing, but it really does mean a lot because they care so much about that competence, the information, the data, the analysis that they're doing on it. That means so much to them. And so if you can give them credit, that's a great way to feel like you're kind of bonding, you're rapport building with your type 5 teammate. So as we wrap it up, give some of those experiments a try. Talk to your type 5 teammates about what you've heard today. Say, I heard this. Is this true for you? If not, what would you prefer instead? Or what should I know about you instead? To start to build even better working relationships, less stress, more productivity, maybe even a little bit more fun. with as a type 5 and then with your type 5 teammates. So if you happen to be a 5 and there's anything that you would add to this list, as always, you can send your thoughts, additional talking points, your personal experience, a specific example over at enneagrammba.com/contact, and just drop your comment, feedback, addition to this episode in the box there. I mentioned it at the beginning of the episode, but we are continuing to book our 2 half-day, full-day signature Enneagram workshop experiences. And then we can always work to create your own depending on your event, your team's needs. We can play with the time. We can kind of play with the topics. We have a kind of structured signature experience, but depending on if your team's going through a big merger, if this is a leadership group, we can tweak those presentations, especially the introduction presentation, a little bit. So I'm going to invite you to check out those options over at enneagrammba.com. We will be back next week with the type 6 workplace overview, striving to feel secure. Have a great weekend. Have a great week whenever you're listening to this. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.